Welcome to the Missing Dots. In a world drowning in emotional polemics and oversimplified street narratives, the Missing Dots cut through the noise with cold, forensic precision to expose the real constitutional deadlock of 35 AH. Why did Caliph Ali ibn Abi Talib defer the immediate trial and cases of Uthman are assassins? Was it weakness, secret alliance, or a masterclass in state preservation under impossible realpolitik constraints? We dismantle the exaggeration factory, audit the primary chronicles, and reveal the strict Islamic evidentiary thresholds that made summary justice illegal while armed rebel coalitions controlled Medina-ass streets. This is not hagiography or sectarian warfare. This is the missing structural truth. Law versus anarchy, procedure versus collapse. Subscribe to the Missing Dots and finally see the dots that history's propagandists deliberately erased.
Yeah, so if we just take a step back and really try to put ourselves there, imagine standing in the dust of Medina in the year 656.
Right.
The Prophet has only been gone for 25 years at this point.
Wow. Yeah, just 25 years.
Yeah, and suddenly you have thousands of heavily armed insurgents camped out right in the middle of the markets. And that is the physical reality we are stepping into. Because when you look at the raw history, those simple stories we are told, they just fall apart completely.
It really is. It's heavy when you try to picture it because we hear this story told so many times.
Yeah.
Right. Painted with these broad emotional strokes.
Mm-hmm.
People want it to be a very clear story of good and evil.
Yeah, they do.
But if we actually slow down and if we put ourselves in those narrow, dusty streets right after Uthman III Caliph was assassinated, it's completely chaotic.
Total chaos. I mean, we have to remember the physical context of the crime because it really dictates everything that happens next.
Right.
This was not some, quiet, isolated murder in the dark alleyway. The assassination was the climax of a multi-week siege.
SubhanAllah.
Yeah, these provincial rebel contingents had marched in from Egypt and from Kufa and from Basra.
So from all over.
From all over. And they had essentially occupied the capital city. They blockaded the caliph in his own home, and they literally cut off his water supply.
I am trying to visualize just the sheer physical reality of that room when the breach finally happened, because it wasn't a clean, single actor event like you see in movies.
No, not at all. The historical sources describe a multi-party scuffle in a very confined, very dark space.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, dozens of agitated armed people surged into the private family quarters all at once. And Uthman's wife, Naila, she was severely injured, trying to shield him with her bare hands in the struggle.
SubhanAllah, that's just horrific.
It is, and there were multiple blows struck from all directions, using blades and heavy objects and staff weapons.
Which makes the aftermath just a forensic nightmare. The best way I can wrap my head around it is imagine a modern-day riot in a small room where all the CCTV cameras are broken.
Right, exactly.
For an absolute fact, a terrible crime happened.
Yeah.
And you even know the general group of people who were standing in the room. But you have absolutely no way of proving whose specific individual action actually caused the death.
That is a very helpful way to visualize it, to visualize that physical barrier to justice. Because of the sheer chaos and the darkness of the room and the number of people involved in the physical assault, it was impossible to isolate the specific individual who delivered the exact fatal blow.
Right.
And in a legal system, that creates an immediate wall.
Wait, I'm getting stuck here, though.
Yeah.
And I think this is what a lot of people feel when they first hear about this.
Okay.
If a whole group of armed men breaks into a house with terrible intentions and someone dies, why doesn't the law just hold the entire mob responsible?
Mm-hmm.
Like, why couldn't Ali just punish the whole group that breached the room? They were all there.
It is a very natural human reaction to want collective justice in a moment of grief. I mean, we all feel that, but we have to look at how classical Islamic criminal procedure actually works. Under this legal framework, which jurists call fiqh al-jinayat, the concept of collective guilt is categorically prohibited when it comes to capital punishment.
Wait, meaning the state cannot execute a group for the actions of an unknown individual within that group?
Yes, and the reason for that is foundational to the faith itself. The Quran, in Surah Al-Isra, verse 33, it explicitly forbids taking a life without individual proven right.
I see.
You cannot execute arbitrary figures from a mob just to satisfy public anger. Every individual is solely responsible for their own specific actions.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Think about the mechanism behind this law. It is designed to protect the innocent above punishing the guilty. If you execute 5 people in a room, but only one actually delivered the fatal strike, the state has just murdered 4 people.
Subhanallah. That's an incredibly strict standard.
It really is.
It moves us right from the physical chaos of the crime scene into the rigid boundaries of the law itself. It seems like Ali's hands were completely tied by the legal framework before he even began.
They were tied by design. And it goes even deeper when you examine the specific requirements for capital punishment, or qisas, in Islamic law. To execute someone for intentional murder, the law requires a threshold of absolute certainty.
Absolute certainty. But what does that actually look like in a 7th century court setting? Because today, we talk about things like beyond a reasonable doubt or a preponderance of evidence. Are we talking about circumstantial evidence here?
Not at all. Circumstantial evidence carries 0 weight in a capital case under this framework.
Zero.
To reach that threshold of absolute certainty, the court requires one of 2 things.
Okay.
First, an unambiguous voluntary confession from the specific perpetrator made without any physical or psychological coercion.
Which, let's be honest, in a mob of thousands of armed rebels, no one is walking into a courtroom to offer a voluntary confession.
Exactly the problem. Nobody is volunteering that.
Right.
So, lacking a confession, the only other acceptable proof for capital punishment is the unanimous testimony of 2 upright male eyewitnesses.
Okay, 2 eyewitnesses.
But here is the critical, often misunderstood detail. They cannot just testify that they saw a man in the room.
Oh.
They cannot even just testify that they saw a man participating in the general assault.
You have to see the actual strike.
They must unanimously testify that they saw the exact lethal strike that directly caused the death.
Yeah.
They have to see the blade enter the body in the fatal moment.
I really have to pause on that.
Yeah.
Are you telling me that even if 500 people saw a mob break into a house, and they saw a struggle, and they saw weapons, but because no one saw the exact millimeter-specific moment the blade caused the fatal wound, the judge has to throw the capital case out?
Yes.
That feels completely counterintuitive to how we view justice today. It almost feels like a failure of the system.
I hear what you were saying, and it feels counterintuitive because modern legal systems are often built to secure a conviction. But classical Islamic criminal procedure is built on a completely different philosophy. It prioritizes the sanctity of human life to such a degree that it would rather let a guilty person walk free than accidentally execute an innocent one.
Wow.
There is a foundational prophetic tradition that legal penalties, the hudud, they must be averted if there's any doubt whatsoever.
The principle of doubt.
Yes, shubha. If there's chaos and darkness and a multi-party scuffle, doubt is the only thing you have.
Yeah.
And that doubt nullifies the execution.
It's fascinating to think about Ali in this moment. The psychological weight must have been crushing. I mean, he is stepping into the role of the Caliph, the head of a massive state, while the public is just outraged.
Absolutely.
People are grieving the horrific murder of his predecessor. They're angry, they're screaming for blood in the streets, and yet he is acting more like a strict constitutional judge than a politician.
That's a great way to put it.
He is choosing procedural due process over extrajudicial violence, even when it is making him wildly unpopular.
He is adhering to the letter of the law. To do otherwise would be to violate the very principles of the state he was trying to lead.
But surely, as the Caliph, didn't he have some discretionary power? I mean, people were demanding justice. It was a complete crisis. Couldn't he just bend the rules just this once to restore order and calm the public?
Bending the rules in this context means committing state-sponsored murder.
Oh.
If Ali had ordered summary executions based merely on suspicion or just based on who was in the mob, that would have constituted extrajudicial killing. And under Sharia, extrajudicial killing is itself murder.
Right.
That would make the state guilty of the very crime it was trying to punish.
He would become liable for qisas himself.
Yes, exactly. And Ali made this very clear to the public in his addresses in Medina, and later when he moved the capital to Kufa, he repeatedly stated that he could not act on collective suspicion without formal legal depositions.
Yeah.
He was legally and practically incapable of executing specific individuals because their specific individual actions were legally unproven.
So looking at the legal side then, I understand why he cannot just execute people without a trial. But let's look at the physical reality again. Ali is looking out his window at these rebel camps. He is the Caliph. The law says he needs a formal trial. Why not just arrest the ringleaders?
Wow.
Put them in chains, hold them in custody, set up a proper court, and start gathering the evidence to have that formal trial.
This brings us to the terrifying math Ali had to do regarding military realpolitik.
The math.
Yeah, we have the physical chaos of the crime, we have the strict legal thresholds, and now we hit the demographic and tactical reality of Medina in 35 AH. You see, Medina was not a fortified military citadel. It was a civilian city.
Right, mostly families and the older generation companions.
Exactly. Medina had no standing army. It had no central police force, no intelligence bureau. The local population was overwhelmingly elderly companions, civilians, and their families.
Yep.
They were not equipped for urban warfare.
And on the other side.
On the other side, you had between 3,000 and 10,000 armed rebel combatants who had marched in from the provinces.
10,000.
Up to 10,000. They were young, they were heavily armed, and they were organized military units.
Wow.
They controlled the streets, they controlled the gates of the city, the markets, the water supply. It was an asymmetrical military occupation.
Okay, I see the danger now.
Now, under the principles of Islamic constitutional governance, the primary obligation of a ruler is state preservation.
Okay.
There is a specific legal mechanism for this, a maxim that dictates how a jurist calculates action during a crisis. It is the principle of averting the greater harm by tolerating the lesser harm.
Averting the greater harm. How does a jurist actually calculate that in a situation like this?
You have to weigh the consequences of your actions. If Ali had sent out whatever small group of loyalists he had to arrest a major rebel leader, someone like Malik al-Ashtar, who was surrounded by his own armed tribesmen,
Right.
what do you think would have happened?
A fight. I mean, a massacre, probably.
A complete urban slaughter. The rebels would have fought back instantly. The surviving senior companions and their families in Medina would have been caught in the crossfire.
Subhanallah.
The capital would have burned to the ground, and the central state would have totally collapsed.
So it's a completely impossible choice.
The terrifying math was this. Do I spark a war that kills thousands of innocent civilians just to arrest a few suspects?
Yeah.
The lesser harm is delaying justice. The greater harm is the destruction of the Prophet's city and the state itself.
So it wasn't just that he wouldn't arrest them. He literally lacked the physical capability to do it without destroying the city.
Exactly.
But wait. He is the caliph of a massive empire stretching across the Middle East. If Medina is occupied by insurgents, why not just call in the provincial armies? Send a letter to Syria or Iraq, bring in the loyal troops, restore order, and make the arrests.
Because the military was entirely fractured, he couldn't just call in the troops because the provincial governors were divided.
I see.
Muawiyah in Syria, for example, controlled the most organized professional military force in the empire. But he was refusing to recognize Ali's authority or send troops to help.
So he is sitting in a capital controlled by rebels with no police force, and the provincial armies aren't even answering his calls.
It is a complete structural collapse. His strategic sequence had to be carefully calculated based purely on survival.
Right.
Step one had to be securing oaths of allegiance from the provinces to rebuild the state and actually raise a loyal military force.
That makes sense.
Step two, establish central executive control and a functioning judicial bench.
Sure.
Only then do you reach step three, holding the formal trial. Justice requires a functioning state, and in 35 AH, the state did not exist.
You cannot hold a trial if the courtroom is on fire and the judge is being held hostage.
That is the grim reality. Establishing order was the mandatory legal prerequisite to the trial itself.
This logic seems incredibly sound.
Yeah.
I mean, it is legally rigorous,
Yeah.
and militarily it seems like the only option to prevent a massacre. But if his strategy of state preservation was so structurally mandatory, why had respected senior figures oppose him so fiercely? I mean, you have Aisha, the wife of the Prophet, and senior companions like Talha and Zubair.
Yes.
These are not minor figures, and they genuinely demanded immediate justice. And then you have Muawiyah in Syria using it as a precondition for his allegiance.
This is where we have to understand the diplomatic impasse. It is very easy for people today to look back and try to paint one side as heroes and the other as villains.
Right, the cartoon version of history.
Exactly. But classical Islamic orthodoxy, scholars like Ibn Taymiyyah and Ibn Hajar, they frame this conflict entirely differently.
Okay.
They do not view it as good versus evil. They call it a situation of dual ijtihad.
Dual ijtihad, meaning both sides are using independent legal reasoning and both are sincere in their conclusions.
Yes. It is a tragic, high-stakes disagreement between sincere leaders who are all facing an unprecedented crisis.
Wow.
Both sides agreed completely that justice for Uthman was an absolute religious obligation.
So there was no argument about whether the killer should be punished.
None at all. The singular point of juristic disagreement was the sequence of events.
The timing of the justice?
Exactly the sequence. Ali's position, as we discussed, was that state consolidation must precede a judicial trial.
Right.
You have to secure allegiance first, build the court, secure the physical space, and then hold the trial. The opposition, particularly Aisha, Talha, and Zubair, they operated on a genuine, deeply felt legal interpretation that the unpunished murder of a caliph in his own home posed an immediate existential threat to the moral legitimacy of the entire Muslim community.
They feared the moral collapse of the Ummah.
They believed that if such a heinous crime went unpunished for even a moment, it would set a precedent that would destroy the sanctity of life in the community forever.
I see.
Therefore, they believed justice must precede state consolidation.
It is like a tragic constitutional catch-22.
It really is.
One side is saying, I will not recognize your authority until you make an arrest and deliver justice. Because without justice, the state has no moral legitimacy.
Yes.
And the other side, Ali, is saying, I literally do not have the physical power to make an arrest or deliver justice until you recognize my authority and give me the backing to do it.
That is the exact deadlock. Ali demanded allegiance first so he could establish a court. The opposition demanded justice first before they would give allegiance.
Man.
It is a structural dilemma in public law that happens during administrative transitions. Centralized authority must be recognized universally before specific grievances can be adjudicated.
And because neither side could compromise on their sequence, it led to civil war.
Yeah.
It is just a massive tragedy.
It is.
But you mentioned Aisha, Kala, and Zubair having genuine grief and a sincere demand for justice.
Yeah.
Was Muawiyah's demand in Syria coming from the same place?
It is a nuanced difference, and historians treat it differently. The historical audits distinguish between the legitimate public grief and demands for justice in Medina, led by the senior companions, and the strategic geopolitical leverage used by Muawiyah in Damascus.
Ah, okay.
Muawiyah used the demand for the extradition of the rebels and the physical bloody shirt of Uthman to consolidate Syrian military loyalty and withhold his oath of allegiance.
He used the deadlock as political leverage to secure his own position.
Yes, he leveraged the crisis. But again, under the framework of dual ijtihad, classical scholars recognize that both camps were acting upon legal interpretations of an impossible situation.
Right.
They differed fundamentally on whether central authority must precede judicial execution or vice versa.
It is just so heartbreaking when you realize that it wasn't a dispute over faith itself or a desire by Ali to protect murderers.
I know, not at all.
It was a structural collapse of a nascent empire. But that is not the story most people know today.
No, it isn't.
The popular narrative is filled with accusations that Ali was weak, or that he was secretly allied with the rebels, or that he protected them on purpose because he wanted power. How did this nuanced, agonizing legal impasse turn into such a toxic partisan story?
That transformation is what historiographers call the exaggeration factory.
The exaggeration factory.
When you look at how history is written, you have to ask, who is holding the pen?
Right.
The narrative of Ali's procedural delay was systematically distorted over the centuries, primarily beginning with Umayyad court chroniclers in Damascus decades later.
Because the Umayyad dynasty needed to legitimize their own rule.
Exactly. They needed a founding narrative. After they took power, they needed to justify their civil wars against Ali and their eventual usurpation of the caliphate.
Wow.
Framing Ali as legally complicit in Uthman's death, or portraying his procedural delay as a deliberate bad faith protection of the assassins, it provided the necessary ideological cover for their dynasty.
So they essentially took a complex constitutional debate and rewrote it into a conspiracy theory.
Yeah.
How do they actually do that in the texts? Like, how does that work practically?
They do it through omission and amplification. They amplified accusations and rumors. Most importantly, they systematically removed references to the chaotic military conditions in Medina.
They just erased it.
They erased the 10,000 armed men from the narrative. They erased the intense legal debates about evidentiary thresholds and absolute certainty.
It's unbelievable.
When you strip away the military occupation and the legal constraints, all you are left with is a caliph who simply refuses to punish a murder.
And over time, Later partisan scribes on all sides just keep adding their own polemical layers to it.
The raw first-century reality of a constitutional deadlock was just buried under centuries of theological hyperbole.
It is really something to sit with.
Yeah.
Just a quiet awe at how a complex, agonizing debate over constitutional sequencing and evidentiary law was flattened by later empires into a cartoonish narrative of heroes and villains. You take away the context, the fact that there were thousands of armed men in the streets, the fact that Islamic law strictly forbids collective punishment, the fact that you need 2 eyewitnesses to the exact lethal blow.
Right.
You erase all of that and suddenly a principled judge looks like a corrupt politician.
And that is why modern historical critical methods, combined with classical textual audits, are so vital.
Yeah.
When scholars analyze the earliest primary chronicles, and they strip away those later dynastic fabrications, what emerges is not an emotionally compromised figure of sectarian folklore.
What emerges is a highly rational leader navigating an impossible structural collapse.
A leader who prioritized the strict rule of law and the preservation of the state when every instinct of the grieving crowd was demanding extrajudicial violence.
Right.
Ali's decision was legally mandated, constitutionally sound, and militarily necessary.
It makes you wonder,
Yeah.
if a leader like Ali was willing to look entirely incompetent to his own people just to uphold the strict rule of law, how many leaders today would pass that test?
That's a profound question.
Would modern politicians choose due process if it cost them their popularity, or would they just feed someone to the mob to save their own careers?
I think you have hit on the main tragedy there. Whenever a society faces a crisis, the demand for immediate satisfying vengeance will always clash with the slow procedural requirements of justice.
Yeah.
The strength of a legal system is tested not when things are calm, but when the mob is at the door.
And true leadership sometimes means tolerating the accusation of weakness in order to prevent total collapse.
To rebuild your mental peace and legacy today, give charity, sponsor a student, and plant a tree. May Allah grant us success. Don't forget to come on, let's essay go. Don't forget to follow this channel, The Missing Dots. Thank you.